What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about springtime bass fishing and how you can target the biggest fish in your lake. Springtime, in my opinion, is your best time to target the biggest fish in your lake, in your fishery, whether it's a river, a pond, a lake, whatever type of fishery it is go time if you're into big fish. These fish, we know what they have to do, right? They are heading to the spawn, they have to feed up, and it is my opinion that this time of the year, these few months, the biggest fish in the lake become more accessible. They sometimes get more stupid. You have the best opportunity to take advantage of those conditions and put that kind of in your favor to catch those big fish, right? Whether it's a highland reservoir that's typically clear and you get an early spring storm and you kind of get those flood kind of conditions, muddies up the water, those fish have to pull to hard cover. So now you know that fish is on that stump. So a fish that might normally be a pelagic fish or out there in open water chasing shad balls now has to commit or has to be at that stump. And now you can make that cast and catch that fish. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I got a couple different scenarios for you, trying to think this up. You know, I was talking about it with Matt and just trying to think up some situations that a lot of our followers might find themselves in this springtime, early spring, during that pre-spawn phase. And then some of the best baits and why I have them tied on. So, you know, I'm not going to go down or, you know, pick a side on that whole forward facing sonar, whatever. But what I will say is it has confirmed a lot of what we've taught or that we've thought about fish positioning, fish movement, fish behavior. You know, there are those true giants in any given fishery that don't necessarily come shallow. You know, maybe they're pelagic fish. You know, I remember several years ago when we were still living on Clear Lake, either it was Matt and I fishing or when he was guiding and targeting those true double-digit bass, you know, we had to catch them in open water. They were no longer relating to Thule lines or points, you know, in shallow on points or rock on points. The shad and the hitch, out there you have hitch, those fish are a pelagic fish. They're offshore for most of the year, and those fish transitioned and they were offshore. The only way you could catch them was find that offshore shad, offshore bait fish, and then throw swim bait or an underspin through them, and successfully caught several double digits just doing that. Now with the advancements of technology, we've kind of confirmed that, right? You see those big blobs on forward facing sonar, whether you're watching, you know, live on Bassmaster or out there on your own boat with it, you see that a lot of those fish are just out there just kind of suspended. So if anything, it's taught us more about fish behavior, fish movement, how they react to baits. But the one time those fish have to come shallow is for the spawn, and that's go time, right? So doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on with this whole, you know, technology thing, bass movement happens. What we've taught for years is being confirmed. That's why I said earlier in this video, these couple months when these fish are doing that pre-spawn spawn thing, even the most finicky giant bass in your fishery somewhat becomes predictable, okay? So that's what I want to emphasize. It's go time. It is a great time to catch the biggest fish in your fishery. Sometimes they become stupid. Now is the time. So let's talk about fish movement really quickly, right? I just talked about those fish having to go shallow. They're going to start coming in, whether it's a fishery that has main lake points, secondary points, they're coming shallow. And shallow is all relative, right? You know, I've seen fish spawn in 10 inches of water. I've seen fish spawn in 18 to 20 feet of water. It all depends on water clarity and sunlight. But what I can tell you Doesn't matter if those fish, let me backtrack. What I can tell you, and you've probably seen this, a giant fish, you know, a big fish in your fishery, doesn't have to be up shallow, but it could be out in deeper water, but just below the surface sunning themselves, right? We know that fish have to get shallow in that warmer water and get their eggs ready. Those big pre-spawn females have to get their eggs ready to do the spawn, right? So whether they're suspended over 100 feet of water or they're up in near a dock in 8 feet of water, those fish are high in the water column in that warmer water, especially with the sun's out, in that sunlight, getting those eggs cooked or getting ready, right? So that's where you see these guys offshore. You know, it's happened to me so many times. I'll be cruising to a spot on my trolling motor. I'll see a giant just sunning herself 2 feet under the surface over 20 feet of water. And you know, she knows I'm there way before, you know, I know she's there. And you could throw whatever at her and she's not going to eat. But now, being able to take that transducer and find those fish and make a long cast, it's definitely put the odds in our favor. And we see a ton of fish being caught on little baits that way, right? It just is what it is. But those fish have always been there. Those fish have to do that. And it, like I said earlier, it's go time. These fish have to go through that process. And then water clarity, if those fish are spawning down in 18, 20 feet, again, they still have to warm up and get their eggs ready. But it's, you know, shallow is all relative depending on the fishery you're on and the water clarity. So I have, I don't know, a bunch of baits out here for you. Just wanted to kind of walk you through a couple different scenarios you might be in, or that I have ran into, and kind of just put it in your mind to think about the different baits and what I feel give myself and hopefully you guys the best opportunity to catch one of those giants. All right, so let's talk about the first scenario. Beautiful early spring day, late in the afternoon. You know, it might be chilly in the morning, right? You got your bibs on, you got your hoodie on, you got your reaper on, whatever you got, but you're cold, you're chilly. Throughout the day, when it gets warmer, that sun gets up high, you've probably seen those big fish up high in the water column, sunning themselves, just like I talked about a little bit earlier, but maybe they're around docks, right? We've all pulled up, hopefully we've all pulled up to a dock and just seen those subs just sitting there just below the surface, just kind of sunning themselves. They're right on the sunline or the shade line, but they're still in that warmer water. You know, I remember days at like Clear Lake and stuff, you pull up to a dock and you'd, like, no exaggeration, you're like, man, there's 45 to 50 pounds of, you know, 5 fish sunning themselves right there. You know, and what do you throw in that situation? So that's kind of the scenario I'm giving you. So sunny day, warm afternoon, those fish are starting to pull up. Now, maybe you don't have docks on your fishery, but maybe you have blowdowns like trees, right, on your shoreline that have fallen into the lake. Those fish will use that canopy just like they use a dock, right? They still get up tight to that dock. Maybe they're sitting in that shade line, or maybe they're under that tree in that shade, but that water's still warm, right? They're doing their thing with their eggs, but they're also looking for an easy meal. And really, my go-to baits for that are going to be a glide bait, right? Something that I can adjust my cadence to, something that I can add twitches to when I feel like I'm getting close to that perfect area, that strike zone. Or maybe I actually have a follower. You know, I threw up along that blowdown tree, that laydown tree, and maybe I didn't see the fish, but now I'm wearing polarized sunglasses and I see that big black sub just like 2 feet, 18 inches behind my glide bait, and I add that twitch, I can make her commit. So that is really, that situation, my go-to bait is gonna be some kind of swim bait, whether it be a glide bait or a skippable swim bait, okay? The mag draft is awesome. You can skip it. It skips actually really, really well. Even with the belly hook you know, system, I actually take some super glue and I'll glue that magnet in there to make sure it doesn't come out. I have had some come out in the past. I'll glue that in there, but it holds that treble hook up close to that belly, and you can skip this thing really, really well. So if you're on a spotted bass fishery or a fishery that has, you know, let's say on the high end, like a 5-pound largemouth, that 6-inch mag draft is sweet. If you're on a fishery that, well, they're eating gizzard shad or they're eating big panfish, crappie, that 8-inch mag draft is awesome as well. And then as far as like, you know, just skipping baits, that burrito top hook, either the 5 or the 6-inch, I typically like the 5-inch. But again, if we're chasing true giants, having a little bit bigger bait doesn't hurt you. It might limit the amount of bites, but you have more drawing power. So that burrito right there, you know, now in swim baits, we're talking, you know, all those baits I held up, you notice one thing in common, we're talking about big boot tail style tails, right? A real wide, real aggressive, with that water warming up, everything's getting more aggressive. Fish are wanting to feed up. The ecosystem is sped up, right? You know, if you're a guy that's on a true trout fishery, you can stay with the vortex style tail. Obviously the Huddleston, the Savage Gear are two great options. But that is my game plan. If I'm fishing laydowns or I'm fishing docks and or I'm in clear water and I feel like those fish are on those key pieces of cover, that's what I'm going with. I'm going with something that I can either draw them out with a drawing power or something that I can twitch and get those fish to react. The only other, I won't say only, because you could skip a jig. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do, but for me, the only other thing that I'm really gonna throw, if I can't get them to eat the big baits, I've talked about this before, some kind of Senko, whether it's a wacky rigged or Texas rigged 5-inch Senko or a 4-inch Senko with a little weight in the head, like a little hover strolling rig, something that I can skip under that dock or throw next to that dock and let that thing do the death spiral. So that's kind of my 1-2 punch. Go for them with the big stuff and then slow down and ultra finesse them. Okay, that's scenario number 1. Fairly simple. Those fish need to be up shallow, and if you can get them to eat a big bait, it is so much fun. Okay, next scenario for you. Let's talk about a scenario where you get, like we have now, we have a storm rolling in. I don't know if you guys can see these clouds behind me. It's starting to rain, so I'll kind of speed this video up a little bit. But you have, even though it's springtime, it's warm out, you have the spring storms coming in, right? You might have water levels rising. You might have more current than normal coming into the water, and you might have muddy or stained water. This can be tricky because, like I've talked about in earlier videos, clarity is all relative. You know, if you're in a fishery that's normally 8 to 10 foot of visibility and you get one of these storms and now you have, you know, 3 to 4 feet of visibility, that might be considered muddy, right? Or if you're in a fishery that normally has 1 to 2 foot of visibility and now you have 8 to 10 inches of visibility, it's not really that different. So it's all relative. But what I will say, that color in the water positions those fish differently. Right off the bat, it makes those fish pull tight to cover. And again, not gonna beat that technology horse, but whether you have side imaging or maybe you have just 2D sonar, just traditional 2D sonar, but you see that there's a brush pile or a stump, right? Something hard. Or you have forward-facing sonar and you pan over, you see a brush pile, or you visibly see a cypress stump, right? You see something that bass should be on. It doesn't matter if you're in a trout fishery where those fish are normally out chasing clear water trout, or trout in open water, open clear water. When that water gets muddy or stained, those fish typically pull to something. So it's visible, or with your technology, it's visible, but it makes those fish predictable and more easier to be caught. So that right there, I mean, basically my 1-2 punt, man, I got A-rigs out here, I got jerk baits, I got crankbaits. For me, it's really easy. I'm throwing either, I mean, I can throw a glide bait, right? If I'm visibly seeing what I'm throwing at, I can throw that glide bait just like I'm fishing docks or blowdowns or laydowns in that clear water for those fish sunning themselves. Same type of deal. I'm bringing it past that stump or that cypress tree, and I'm twitch right when I get there, right? And I might switch up, you know, that's that Chimera shad by Bait Sanity. I might go with a different color, maybe like a bone or a white or something they can see. Might go with, you know, a swim bait with some chartreuse in it. But I'm adding those twitches where I feel like that the best area is, right? But if I'm just casting and I'm covering shore and then I'm coming across up to that stump, man, it's starting to rain pretty good. We'll keep going though. I'm throwing a spinner bait or a chatter bait. This also works good if you're up shallow, like we know where these fish are going, right? They're up in those secondary, past those secondary points in these spawning bays. You might have some emergent grass, right? Some grass that's just starting to grow up. A chatterbait and a spinnerbait are like my 1-2 punch, especially in that stained, dingy water. You have flash, you have vibration, but more importantly, you know where those key areas are, okay? The square bill. Maybe you're in a fishery where you're fishing just those spawning bay flats, and you can visibly see, maybe you don't have stumps, but you can see that there's a grass line and you still have that stained or dingy water. That's where I'm going with that bright square bill, right? And we'll link all these products down below in the video description. Gonna kind of race because it's starting to pour. But again, springtime weather, it changes like by the hour, right? You know, we have caught so many big fish. We have buddies that have caught so many big fish in that same scenario, except they were flipping a big jig. We know so many giants that have been caught, you know, trout eaters, right? Fish that are normally out there chasing trout, but yet now you're catching them on a big half ounce or something flipping or pitching jig, right? It makes those fish predictable where they're at, and now you can take advantage of them and stick them on that, you know, that big old gaff of a jig hook. Obviously, I'd rather stick a giant on that guy right there than these little itty bitty guys right there. Okay, so it just makes them more predictable. What else do I got for you? I think that's about it. Obviously, you can be chucking and winding an A-rig, right? I might throw some chartreuse and blue on there if that water's dingy. If it's clear, I'm losing the blades. I just feel like it's more natural. If it's dingy or muddy, you're in that second situation, add some blades on there, add some more flash, some vibration. But now is the time to get out there. Now, with the whole emergence of forward-facing sonar, obviously, there have been a ton of big fish caught on this little guy right there, right? Little spunk shad, doing the mid-strolling technique. It works. You don't need forward-facing sonar. Keep wiping this lens for you guys. You don't need forward-facing sonar. Just like those situations where I talked about, whether it's a laydown or a blowdown or a dock piling or a stump or a cypress tree, you can still fish it visibly and get that shake going. You can get those fish to commit on that. We know that big ones eat that, obviously. But more importantly, it's those fish that are out there suspending that like to eat that less pressured, smaller stuff. You know, if you're in that second situation, you know, you got that grass coming up, that chatterbait works amazing. Big fish just eat chatterbaits. They really do, especially in the springtime. What else? So we talked about that, the jerkbait. Obviously that jerkbait's a 1-2 punch. You know, you don't need forward-facing sonar to be throwing a jerkbait. Big ones eat a jerkbait this time of the year. In my opinion, two of the best ways to get fish to react mid-column or up in the water column is a jerkbait and a glide bait. So those are obviously on my list. And then guys that just want to commit to the big bait, like we talked about earlier, you know, your Huds, your Savage Gears, your Ospreys, your they used to be called hog hunters, right? They used to be the big magnums we used to throw out west, or the big mag drafts, right? If you're a guy that just wants to pick up a swim bait rod, you want to chuck and wind. Those same situations, those fish will eat on that dock, especially if you're skipping or you come across that light right along that shade line where they can ambush from that dark to the light. I mean, we've caught so many fish out west, so many fish out here on the mag draft or that style of swim bait. But this time of the year, it's an amazing time to get out there. You know, those two scenarios, obviously you can adjust them or tweak them however you'd like, but you know, muddy, stained, shallow, those fish have to go, they have to go out there and start doing their spawn process. So they become, the next few months, they become fairly accessible. And they get stupid sometimes. So hopefully this gives you guys a little bit of confidence. It doesn't matter if you're fishing a swamp or a clear highland reservoir, these are the baits that I typically have tied on, or some variants of them, some version of them. You know, if you're a guy that's just chucking and winding, obviously, for me, I would recommend chucking and winding something a little bit larger than what you're used to. Whether it's a 6-inch, you know, if you're typically throwing a 4.8 Kitech, try throwing this guy. If you're a guy that throws this guy, try throwing this guy. You will have more drawing power. You know, you're literally fishing a larger area when you're throwing those bigger baits. You just pull those fish from a lot farther away. Fish are willing to travel a lot farther to eat a bigger bait like that. And then if you're looking at them, whether visibly, you know, throw that hover rig in there, throw that weightless Senko in there, or if you're looking at them on forward facing sonar, you know, obviously throwing that mid-stroll technique is a killer way to catch them too. Jerkbait as well. You find yourself in that muddy, stained, shallow water, situation. That spinnerbait and that chatterbait are go-tos. And then the biggest fish tend to eat that jig for whatever reason. When you can get uptight with that cover and you flip that in there, whether you're throwing heavy, I don't know, whatever fluorocarbon you're throwing, whether it's Seagar or Sunline or whatever, upsize your line. I really like that Invisex or the Sunline. You know, I'm throwing 17, 20, 25. I'm throwing heavy line because it doesn't matter. They can't see, but I'm flipping typically braid to a leader. If I'm doing that, I might go heavy mono, but I'm flipping real tight to that cover and those big ones eat. Again, a lot of the time of the year, some of those fish, they go off, right? It wasn't until late we could verify that for sure. It's something we've always taught and thought and took advantage of, right? Catching them on underspins out there and, you know, suspended in 60 feet of water. You know, they're only 15 feet down on shad balls or kokanee or whatever, you know, catch them on an underspin. But those fish are typically out there. They're harder to find. As they're coming shallow, whether you're a shore-based angler or a kayak fisherman, you don't have to paddle as far. Those fish are coming to you, and it's a great time to catch the biggest fish in your fishery. Guys, if you have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I will try to get those as soon as possible. But if nothing else, think about those two different scenarios and how they could apply to your fishery. Apply it, but get out on the water. Now is the chance. I don't care if you're throwing a weightless Senko or a 10-inch swim bait. Now is the chance for you to possibly stick the biggest fish of your life, the biggest fish in your fishery. Guys, as always, thanks for the support. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.